Hey, everybody. Welcome to Connecting Visionaries, Doing the Hard Things. For those of you who have been super tuned in, this was originally going to be an in-person event with two parts to it. The first part, which is what we're doing today, is having two incredibly inspirational and visionary people who have done incredibly hard things. Reshma Shetty, who's the co-founder of Gingko Bioworks, Katie Rae, who's the CEO and managing partner of The Engine, a founder and a funder, and then an awesome moderator in Janet Wu, who is a reporter and anchor at Bloomberg. So we're going to have an excellent discussion. You're going to have an opportunity to ask questions. Please feel free to put your comments in the chat. And I know you're going to enjoy this. I want to thank, I'm here with a number of the other leaders from the All Raise Boston chapter who have helped to put this together and are going to be here for the last half hour of the event to host breakout rooms. We have Emily Green, my co-lead, Kate Castle, Kiki Mills Johnston, Veronica Armstrong, Danielle Johnson, and I mostly want to thank Jenny Goodman, who's really helped to put this event together and to be the organizer and make everything run smoothly behind the scenes. Also from All Raise HQ, we should have out there Alexandra Pinkney, who does marketing, and Christy Lennox, who is our liaison to the headquarters team. We also want to thank SVB for being a sponsor, Mita Kapadia, who is the VC relationship manager for SVB, has also been a big part of putting this together. And then this is also in partnership with Northeastern. Betsy Ludwig is here with us. She is the executive director of women's entrepreneurship at Northeastern, and she supports WISE, which is a student-led club of Women's Interdisciplinary Society for Entrepreneurs. And we're going to hear from WISE as well. We've got a lot of students in the audience, as well as our regular All Raise members of funders and founders. This might be the biggest online event that we've held. We know we had about 300 registrants. So lots of people out there. Let us hear from you in the chat, and feel free to ask questions. We'll keep an eye on those and enjoy the event. So now I would like to introduce Betsy Ludwig, the executive director of women's entrepreneurship at Northeastern.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much. As Sarah said, I'm Betsy Ludwig, and I'm Executive Director of Women's Entrepreneurship here at Northeastern. And I'm so sad not to be welcoming you to Northeastern's campus for this star-studded fireside chat. But if all goes according to plan, we're going to have part 2 in March. At Northeastern, we are committed to inspiring and empowering next-generation female founders and innovators. A few years ago, we realized that lots of young men were coming to college wanting to be the next Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, the list goes on. But there weren't a lot of role models for young women to ideate and innovate. And they weren't participating in our programs as readily as the men. This is one of the reasons we are thrilled to be partnering with All Raise and SVB on this event featuring women doing hard things. So thank you to Reshma Shetty, Katie Rae, and Janet Wu for taking time to speak candidly about your experiences to the audience. Over the past years, we've developed a few signature programs to address this imbalance. And one of these programs, which Sarah alluded to, is WISE, which has grown beyond our wildest expectations. To give you a frame of reference, I always think of WISE and All Raise as kind of kindred spirits with aligned values and goals, just at different life stages. WISE is a student-run, non-academic program that now attracts over 800 students each year and has created 30 leadership positions to run its various programs. It's important to note that WISE is supported not only by external sponsors, but by all of Northeastern's 9 colleges, from health science to engineering to business, media design, liberal arts, law, and computer science. We want young women to be inspired to solve interdisciplinary complex problems. So now let me introduce 2 students who embody all of the passion and energy and enthusiasm of WISE. They are true future visionaries, Toby Chima and Rachel Dom. They're going to tell you about WISE. Toby is a current student pursuing her Bachelor of Science in Behavioral Neuroscience with a minor in design. She began her WISE journey as VP of We Support, our mentorship program, and is now co-director of WISE with Rachel Dom. Rachel is also a current student at Northeastern, majoring in psychology and environmental science, and she's the founder of Rooted Living. Rooted Living is a mission-driven, eco-friendly, plant-based snack company. And I've just been told that Rachel's been selected as a finalist for the Global Student Entrepreneurship Awards in Chicago, and she'll be flying there next month. So congratulations, Rachel. And without taking any more time, I will pass the virtual stage over to Rachel and Toby.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Betsy, for that lovely introduction. For those that might have missed it, I'm Toby. I'm one of the co-directors of WISE, studying behavioral neuroscience and design at Northeastern. Alongside me is Rachel, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, my name is Rachel. I am also a third year. I'm a co-director alongside Toby, and I'm so passionate about everything that WISE does. So really excited to talk to you today.
So if you were curious, WISE stands for the Women's Interdisciplinary Society of Entrepreneurship. We're dedicated to showcasing entrepreneurship in an interdisciplinary night, helping women and non-binary folks develop an innovative mindset through bi-weekly workshops, a thought incubator, some mentorship pairings, as well as a venture catalyst, and newly a summit that we will be having in March. If we could switch to the next slide, that'd be awesome. Okay. And we have a plethora of programs and along our organization, which are ways that you can get involved, which Rachel will share more about.
Yeah, so WISE is really a space for women to feel empowered. Of course, we have all of these resources that we offer women that have to do with education and speaking opportunities and self-growth and leadership, but it really is about inspiring empowering them to see themselves in the biggest light that they can. And so we have opportunities all the way from starting an idea and growing it to actually launching it, and kind of everything in between as well. And this couldn't be made possible if it wasn't for all of the people that contribute to WISE from the educational standpoint. So all of the people that come in and speak to WISE, those that come in and serve as mentors for these women, that's the backbone of WISE, is the type of people that offer their time and support. And so if you're interested in making a difference on so many women's lives, we'd love to have you join the WISE community. We have a little QR code that you can scan right here, and that will take you to a form that you can fill out. And it talks a little bit about what you'd be interested in doing, how you maybe could serve as an impact, but it really is like the most incredible opportunity, and these women will give so much back to you as well as you will give them. So thank you so much for having us here, and we're happy to answer any questions at any point.
Yeah, feel free to follow us on Instagram, as well as follow us on our website, sign up for our contact list, and we will be in touch. And we'll pass it back to Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Toby and Rachel. I'm so inspired by the work done by WISE and at Northeastern. It's such a great organization to work with. So the announcements here are: stay tuned, get involved, sign up for part 2. This was all going to be in one big night, which included this panel and then an opportunity to get involved with tables. And, you know, we really are going to have like a lot of networking for people on March 2nd. So part 2 is going to happen in March 2nd. We will have people, influencers from the community, and lots of different ways for members to get involved. And that will include both students and people from our general community of founders and funders. And then for March 26th, that is primarily for the student community. However, if you feel you would like to be a mentor or you have something to give, we would also like to have other members from the All Raise community. So, so looking forward to seeing people in person March 2nd and March 26th. So now I would like to introduce, I'm going to introduce Janet Wu, who is a well-known reporter and anchor from Bloomberg. She's going to be conducting the interview with Katie Rae and Reshma Shetty. You know, she does this for a living. And I know that Reshma and Katie also have a lot of stories to share and a lot to say. And Janet is going to also plan to play this interview on Bloomberg. So that's kind of exciting. Janet is a special friend to me and to my firm, and I'm going to let her take it away and introduce the speakers. So enjoy. Thanks, you guys.
Sarah, thank you so much. On the subject of doing difficult things, we are very fortunate to be joined by two standout women who are doing just that and doing it quite well. Their formal bios are online and they're frankly too long for me to read for you. It would take up the hour, so I'm just going to do an informal intro. Reshma Shetty is a co-founder of Gingko Bioworks, which just had an IPO in September after becoming the first synthetic biology unicorn. We'll let her explain more about synthetic biology in a moment. But I do want to point out Gingko Bioworks now trades under the uber cool symbol of DNA. Katie Rae is the president of The Engine, the venture capital arm of MIT. Pull up their webpage, theengine.xyz, and you'll see their motto in big, bold letters: we invest in tough tech. She leads the team investing to the tune of $660 million. I hope that's the correct amount. So to begin with, I always feel to see where we are going, we need to have a clear picture of where we are right now. So I want to begin with a similar question for each of you. In your respective fields, which are traditionally male-dominated, what is the current balance or imbalance that you see? Katie, let's start with you from the funding side.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. If you look at the limited partners who back the general partners who run venture firms, actually there's more diversity on the limited partner side, right? Because many of the universities and foundations, their chief investment officers are women. And but then if you go to the GP side, we're still maybe at the very most hovering about 6-7% of general partners. And that would be the most generous look you could give at that. So lots of firms have realized that this is important, gender diversity on the GP side, and they've hired a lot of junior people. But if you look at who controls money and controls decision-making, it is extremely male-dominated. Mm-hmm. And then if you go the next level and the most important level, and you look at the entrepreneurs and who gets money, it's so stark. And there's lots of news articles that overplay it. But basically what happens is female entrepreneurs do fairly well in the seed rounds, and then the A round almost all hit the wall. And so when you see an A round company led by a female founder, CEO, it's very unusual. And it's something that I believe in the next generation of female founders, we are going to break through that sound barrier. Mm-hmm. But we're early days on that right now. And I mean, Reshma, I'm sure you could attest to this, like Reshma being not only a founder, but a sitting executive at the IPO level, it's astonishing. And a woman of color, like kudos to her for her fortitude. And she's one of the few people.
Indeed. And Reshma broke through any walls in front of her. She is, as you noted, the only female of the 4 MIT co-founders they met at MIT of Gingko Bioworks. So Reshma, while there has been progress with women in STEM, how would you describe the current imbalance?
Yeah, it's a good question. The reality is at the earlier stages of the pipeline, right, in grad school and whatnot, there's not that much of an imbalance, right? Particularly in PhD programs, it's particularly in the more bio-oriented side, it is pretty balanced. And you just see a steady attrition sort of after that. And I think in terms of entrepreneurship and founders, one thing that struck to me is that, the female founder community is not big. But if you look at most of them are not in hard tech, right? There are actually very, very few female founders who are starting hard tech companies and having a technical leadership role in those companies. And as Katie said, as you get further and further along in the stages, Series B, Series C, it just keeps dropping off. And so that's, to me, is what's stark, is that overlap of not having that many founders of really technical hard tech companies, tough tech companies, as Katie calls them, and then not having that many in the kind of later stages.
So we talk about that dropout rate that you're seeing for both of you along that runway. And Reshma, we want to remind the many entrepreneurs watching right now that you were not an overnight success. Gingko Bioworks was founded in 2008, so a decade plus journey to going public 4 months ago. What was the hardest part of that timeline?
The hardest part is always getting started, right? We started the company straight out of graduate school. None of us had any business experience. We had no relationships with investors. We didn't candidly even have a technology or a business model. So we really started from a blank sheet of paper. And so, the earliest stages, I think, are always the hardest. That started to change, as Katie said. There are more and more seed stage focused funds who are supporting sort of some of the more off the beaten path technologies and whatnot. But I think, making the leap and getting started is usually the hardest bit.
And speaking about getting started, I want to remind everyone that Katie is also an entrepreneur, because building and launching an investment fund really requires the same amount of mountain scaling and resiliency and overcoming the no's. In addition, I've been doing research and I really have never found another fund like the Engine. So Katie, I want to ask you about your biggest challenges creating this new model of investing.
Can you hear me? Because I appear to be frozen on the screen.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Then even better. Running a venture capital fund has a lot in common with entrepreneurship. It's not the same, but there are some commonalities there. You have to ask other people for money. You can't do anything without other people's money, unless you were born a billionaire. And God, I wish that would have been really fun. But you basically have to ask other people for money, and you generally level up. So the first fund that I raised was $3 million. And now I raise funds that are $300 million or maybe $400 million next time. You basically crawl along the bottom of the earth in the beginning, and especially as a female GP. I had to build my reputation. I had to invest in things just as entrepreneurs do, right? Mm-hmm. They have to you guys at Gingko had to show that your experiments work, that SynBio was going to be a big industry, right? I had to do very similar things. I am not conflating them though, because they are different, right? Entrepreneurs are taking a single bet, and I take a whole bunch of bets and work with a lot of founders.
By the way, an entrepreneur once told me that your idea is really not worth doing unless you're doing it with other people's money, no matter what you were born with. Do you agree with that?
I don't actually fully agree with that. I think other people's money helps scale what you're doing, but I am incredibly, there are many people who build their company from a credit card. I think they're amazing. So I don't, but I think for certainly in what we call tough tech or hard tech, it's very, very difficult to do that because of the capital that you need to get started.
So I want to ask you one more question about the venture business and investing. We know that it is male dominated. It's hard for us to think of that now, as we were just introduced by Glasswing Sarah Fay, and we have so many excellent female investors in this virtual room. But I just want to ask you about that. Does it still feel to most people? I know you gave us some numbers that were tough in the single digits, but do you think that most women still say, you know what, it is too male dominated?
Are you asking me or Reshma?
I'm asking you first. Then.
You know what? I'll bet Reshma has a similar experience. Like my entire career, I've worked with a lot of guys, and that's wonderful. Like so many incredible people doing incredible things. Do I wish there were more women? Always. And that's because I think there are an equal number of incredibly driven, smart women as there are men. I do not think there is any difference there. And so I just think we're missing. And that's why I seek more. But it's still male dominated. But that's changing. Like I have a 17-year-old daughter. I get to hang out with that age group. I get to hang out with the college. I get to hang out with grad school. You watch this generation come up. Mm-hmm. No one has taken a back seat in this generation. They're like, no, we're done with that. And so I get to learn every day and be inspired by that. And I think that flip is coming. And I know for myself, hands are open. Like I want to help as many people as possible. I'm sure, Reshma, if you talk to PhD students who are female, who want to start a company, she is like an idol to them. So it's coming. It's really coming. And I feel a little tearful saying that because it matters.
Yeah,
a lot.
It does matter. And even though Reshma is the idol now, we know that she had her fair share of no's early on the process, and people were like, what? So Reshma, I have a question for you. We talked about how unique the engine is. Had it existed during your early years at Gingko Bioworks, is that a place where you would have sought money?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, at the time we started Gingko, nobody really backed hard tech or biotech companies launched by PhDs straight out of grad school. That was just an unheard of thing. It was happening in the tech world, right? Technology companies were getting started by college dropouts, but it was unheard of in biology and biotech. And so, I really wish the engine had been around, but even more, I wish that Katie had been around to fund us.
Well, that is high praise. Building on that, Reshma, hindsight is 2020. Looking back now, is there anything you would have changed in how you raised money and how you scaled Gingko Bioworks?
People often ask me about my biggest regret. And, my biggest regret in starting Gingko is actually not thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion issues earlier. I think early on in Gingko, I was just so focused on just trying to scrap together the money, scrap together the lab, get experiments done, that, it just never occurred to me. And I feel foolish saying this, but it didn't occur to me that was something I needed to think about or focus on. And I personally feel like that was a missed opportunity in recruiting some key talent. And so my biggest piece of advice to founders is that there's talent pools out there that are supremely undervalued by the market. And go take advantage of that and hire these amazing people who are being overlooked by others to help build your companies.
Can I put you on the spot? Because obviously with your massive fundraising, you went from a small company, I believe in 2018, you maybe had about 2.5 dozen people. And now how large is your workforce now?
600 plus.
And can you speak to us, and growing. Can you speak to us a little bit about what your numbers are now as far as diversity, how many women and percentage of people of color? Do you have a rough idea? I know it's really hard when your company's growing so fast.
No, we do track that actually quite closely. What I can tell you is that we've made a lot of progress amongst new hires. We're almost 50-50 with respect to underrepresented genders amongst new hires. But we have this legacy problem that we're still trying to correct around getting our numbers up. And so that's still an ongoing area of significant effort for us.
It's interesting. I want to share something that we do at Bloomberg, being so data obsessed. We just track who we interview. They just spit back at us this many female CEOs, this many female investors, this many investors of colors. And it's really just interesting to see it. And then they give us targets. And even for an event like this, they'll come back and ask me, well, is there a lot of representation? And we can think about it, but it's just that extra step of thinking about it, which is helpful. So, Katie, I want to go back to you because obviously a lot of people here know a lot about the two of you, and then there are some people that do not. So I want you, if you can briefly share a few examples of the kind of companies you fund, because when we talk about tough tech, I think some people don't realize exactly how tough this is. And it's not just tough, it's like saving the planet tough.
Yeah, I mean, we invest, we have these incredible universities here and in many other parts of the country where you have students and professors working and directed, often with government money, on some of the biggest problems, right? Climate change, or how are we going to save humans, or how are we going to grow enough food to feed the planet, or how are we going to get smarter about things, right? Like all the stuff in quantum computing. So we back those types of founders that like are on a mission to do something that will be truly impactful in a positive way to the planet. So a couple of examples, and these are obvious ones if you look at our portfolio. Commonwealth Fusion, we believe they'll be the first commercial fusion company in the world. They are going to create what we call net positive energy. And I'm going to geek out for you for just a second, but that means your tokamak, which is your power plant, is going to create more energy, clean energy, than it takes to cool it. And that has been the holy grail, really, of fusion science for the past 50 years. We are at the precipice of that. When they come to market, we will be able to power the planet with these tiny little tokamaks all over the place. That will be a fundamental shift in how we use carbon or don't use carbon for almost every industry. And that, if you're under 50 years old, you should care about that a lot because,
Speaking of other people's money, I think everyone read recently the $1.8 billion B round. I said, I've never heard of a B round like that, but it started on the slate of the engine. And indeed, I often describe your company, Reshma, Gingko Bioworks, and what Katie funds at the engine. These are all companies that need to be explained. They're not social media apps or games. You have to explain something that's very complex and very difficult. So, Katie, I want to stick with you for a moment, because when you have a difficult, complex company that requires a long runway and a lot of money, how do you greenlight an investment? Who is in the room and how do you make the decision?
Yeah, so it's fundamental that there are deep technologists there who understand the engineering risk you're taking, right? Because these things take a long time and require a lot of capital. So if you don't really understand that risk, and when you will take risk out of that, you can't really underwrite an investment. So that's fundamental. But then you also have to understand the plan. That's the commercial plan and the technical plan and the people behind it. And the most important thing, as I think Reshma will attest to, is the people, because you figure out a lot on the technology as you go. And so but underwriting, I think the special part about what we do is we have to understand, where did this technology come from? Why is it a breakthrough? How did it get there? And is it real? Like, you can't be smoked by an entrepreneur who really doesn't have anything. That's just, that will really harm your reputation. And it's not that maybe they fail and they can't get there, but if they were really bringing something that wasn't truly understood by other scientists, I think you're in trouble in the kind of work that we do.
Good point. By the way, I want to invite people to start submitting questions already. I can't believe it's 4:30, but we're going to try to get to some of your questions as we possibly can at the end of our conversation. So speaking of explaining, Reshma, you, again, people heard this company, Gingko Bioworks. They heard unicorn, and then they would say, what the heck does it do? How difficult was it for you to deliver your message and get believers?
I think it was incredibly difficult, right? I mean, what we do is not, something that consumers directly experience in a very visceral way, like Facebook or Amazon or something like that. And so what we end up doing is telling stories, right? Telling stories that capture the imagination, that telling analogies that help people relate to something else. And so I think part of being a good founder, particularly in these sort of mission-driven, tough tech companies, is telling the story of what could happen if the bet pays off.
Okay, and I just have to ask you this because we're curious and we have you here right now. It's you and 3 other male founders. I know you're founders, nice group of people, but did you find yourself clashing with them or disagreeing with them because you bought a different perspective on the messaging?
Look, we have 5 founders. There have been many times over the last 20 years of working together, because we worked together first at MIT and then last 13 years at Gingko, where we disagreed. But I have to say that I've been incredibly lucky that my co-founders are not only my co-founders, they're also my friends, and in one case, my husband, right? And so while we will sometimes disagree, having that mutual respect, it has been key to the length and hardiness of our relationship. And so I think, my co-founders have made me a better person, right? I continue to learn from them to this day, even though I've literally worked with them for 20 years.
Yeah, that's a lot of work husbands that you have to manage. Katie, I know you have a lot of work husbands. I want to go back to our main topic of how we can bring equity into investing. So I want your opinion on how you think we can attract more women to venture and private equity, and what are some of the barriers that specifically need to be addressed?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, and I think this is true for entrepreneurs too, like you have to learn how to raise money. And I would say I had 3 male mentors who already ran their own venture capital firms, who I regularly over years went to and said, wait, how do you do that? Wait, what did you say that made somebody write you a $20 million, $50 million, $100 million check? And I got better at it over time. And I'm answering this question by saying, like, if you want to be a great venture capitalist, you need money. So you have to learn to raise money. It's just like being a great startup that needs money. You got to learn how to raise money. So I think cracking that code and having more women run their own firms is essential to the shift here. And that's why a lot of people say, hey, isn't it better to have 5 more female partners at Sequoia? Well, I have no control over that, but I certainly have control over who I can mentor and if I can help people raise their own funds. So I think it is incumbent upon seeding these new firms that then that are diverse, that will back more diverse founders. I think that's the way to change.
By the way, we have some amazing questions coming in, but I want to quickly ask Katie one more question of raising a fund. Your fund, as we said before, is unique. It's attached to MIT. Do you think that your fund could have existed without a place like MIT? And is it possible that we will ever get other funds similar to yours that are taking the risks on the moonshots that can really help?
Yeah, I just want to say our fund is spun out of MIT, but MIT only has 10% of our LPs. So those 10% of the money, but we have a really unique partnership with them, which is amazing. But I would say, yes, other funds could exist like ours for sure. And there are other examples of funds like ours that have been raised over the last few years. And I think that's super exciting. And some of them are even run by women. So I think that it will be a growing trend. I think technology is where growth will happen. And therefore, you can't ignore tough tech or hard tech because it is such a fundamental part of the technology play that we have.
Okay, I'm going to try to get to some of these excellent questions. One is for Reshma. What was your biggest surprise in raising money, and how did it change at each stage?
It was interesting that the very first round we read was coming out of Y Combinator. So we were the first biotech company to participate in Y Combinator. And I think the surprise for me is that, fundamentally I'm an engineer by training, right? But really what was key to our first raise was commercial traction, right? In some sense, people just gave us a free pass on the technology in many ways because they were like, oh, you're an MIT PhD, you must have some technology there that is meaningful. And so really it was just all about what kind of commercial traction we were seeing, which sort of led to our initial investment. So that was a little surprising to me as an engineer, but that's how it played out.
Katie, really fascinating question from Allison. Do you think cases like Theranos hampered efforts to fund and support female founders?
I mean, I don't know about all of you, but it's been brutal to watch that trial. And I think much like the Ellen Pao trial, I think it has a profound effect on our community, an outsized effect. It's not fair. How many quasi-fraudulent male founders have there been? Many. But there's one woman, and like now every woman has to bear that cross. It sucks. I mean, just realistically, but it's real, right? Everybody, science is bearing it, and female founders are bearing it. And, you know, I really think I caution, right? Just like you have, Janet, for you have targets of how many female founders. So every female founder that makes it out has 10 or 100x the amount of media opportunities as a equivalent male founder. That could be used for good, or it can be used to overhype something. And you got to be real careful there. And you see it happen all the time. And so I am really careful when I work with female founders of like, hey, wait a second, you got to be real careful. You don't get too far over your skis, because you have to be able to deliver. And Theranos got over their skis. They may have had something, but the hype cycle out and their ability to fundraise was way over where the company was.
Mm-hmm. We have an interesting question for Reshma. I know that Katie can also talk about this as well, but Reshma, Alice wants to know how you went about deciding who you would partner with as investors, because there are a lot of people that aren't always having the best interests of your company in mind, and they're not willing to stick it out with patient capital, which is something else that the engine does, being very, very patient. So how did you decide that?
It's a great question. And, you know, I would love to say we had some great way of choosing, but honestly, I think in some level, we were just very explicit about what our plans were for the company, right? Our intent had always been to stay a mission-focused company. We were founder-led. We wanted to continue to grow the company. We weren't looking for a quick flip or a quick exit. And we were very, very clear about that in all of our interactions with investors. And so candidly, that I think acted as sort of an implicit filter, right? If folks were interested in a quick flip, if they were interested in a quick buck, you know, they kind of self-selected out from our process because they understood who we were and what we wanted to do.
Were there any other qualities you were looking for, particularly in investors?
I think just folks who are passionate about the space, you know, candidly. You know, some of our early investors, they just have been tremendous supporters over the years. And so I'm so grateful to them.
So I want to get to this question from Alexandra because we have some hardcore investors in this virtual room. This question from Mark, among the hardcore investors in this room. Is there a repeatable de-risking playbook at the decision-making phase, or is it different for each company you consider? And I would even say, even including the companies that you take on for your portfolio. So wants to know how you achieve minimizing downside risk.
I mean, listen, yes, there are a set of things that have to be there to say yes to any investment, but those are the easy ones. It's the non-repeatable stuff are the decisions you're making about human beings. And I wish there was a playbook to say, like, if they say this, therefore it's an investment. Like it's a brew, basically, of how the founders interact, where we think they're going to get to. Do they have the guts to take the long haul? Those are intangibles. And I wish people were robots and we could just check the boxes and be done, run the algorithm, but they're not. And so every decision is an idiosyncratic one.
Reshma, I have a personal question for you because you got this idea when you were still in school and you're running with it. Do you think that this is not your last startup, or do you think that this one has so much scale that this is going to be consuming your life for a long time?
Oh, this is definitely my one and only startup. I am not a serial entrepreneur. No, I mean, I'm, at the end of the day, I never planned to be an entrepreneur. I never planned to be a founder, right? For me, it was all about our mission to make biology easier to engineer. And so starting a company just happened to be the best way to advance our mission. But that's what motivates me is advancing our mission.
Quickly, can you share with the audience, because I didn't give you time to do that, about some of the cool things that you're developing right now in the real world products?
Yeah, so at Gingko, we essentially have a platform for what we call cell programming. So basically rewriting the DNA of a cell to do useful things. And so it turns out there's a whole bunch of different applications that you can use cell programming for. So for example, we partner with a spin-out company that we formed called Motif Foodworks, and they're bringing new food ingredients to market to help reduce our dependence on animals. So they're basically bringing forth ingredients for animal-free meats to have more sustainable food supply. We're working with another company, Join Bio, on engineering microbes to fix nitrogen to reduce fertilizer usage. We just spun out a company recently called Archaea, led by Jasmina, truly tremendous female entrepreneur in the personal care space. So we work across a lot of different sectors and markets.
Are we going to find a lot more spin outs from you in the years?
I certainly hope so.
Got it. So I can't believe time is just passing by very quickly. And I need to ask the both of you, and we're going to still try to take all these questions. As we look at your careers, which have been so successful, and of course, everyone is looking to you as an example. Katie, what advice would you give to women who want to become investors, not just for returns, but also for transformation?
Yeah, I mean, I think you always have to ask yourself, what mission are you on, right? I mean, you hear this from Reshma, and the best founders, it's not about the money. It's about what the change is they want to see in the world. And so I think everybody has to ask themselves, what are you in it for, right? And I think for me, I always have loved to work with people. But when I was on the entrepreneurial side purely, what was my passion? It was about the team I was working with and what we were getting to. And so for me, I love working with founders and figuring out how to amplify what they do. And I think if you don't understand what mission you're on, you're not going to do a great job, especially in transformational companies, because it takes a long time. My speech to the founders when I decide, I want to be in this one, is like, you're going to know my grandchildren. I'm probably going to know your children, or at least your co-founders' children. Mm-hmm. And like, you better really like working with me, because this is a long-term gig. But that's the most fun thing I do, is to get to see the founders really grow into like incredible executives running big companies, global scale companies. And often, like Reshma, they were PhDs out of MIT. Nobody ever thought they were going to do this. And now they're running, billion-dollar companies that can have a huge impact. And that is my greatest pleasure, is to see that transformation happen.
So I like to give the example that I was one of the advisors at Delta V, the summer incubator program at MIT. And I met the founders of Biobot when they were still students, and they had to do this mixer. And I was the person to come in to say, I don't understand what you're talking about. I'm just the regular non-tech person. I don't understand. So they were giving me their pitch. And I said, that's awesome. But for very uptight groups of people, you're just going to have to say that without the words that make them squirm when we always think they're eating dinner or whatever, but you can do it. And then boom, 2 years later, I'm interviewing them every 3 months at Bloomberg, and they completely transformed and scaled up in such an impressive way. I think that's something also that we need to think of now is, on one hand, Katie, I think that what you've done is almost daunting and so impressive, because you are committing to companies and you're not looking for the 10-year flip or the exit, or we're going to return this portfolio. These are ideas that can take decades to grow, and they're going to be that transformational. And yet things are also moving at such a fast pace.
Right. But you have to understand, I'm the most patient person you've ever found. Like we're not just waiting. We are people are actively hitting huge milestones at rapid pace.
Yeah.
That's how they're going to raise more capital.
Mhm.
So yes, we're trying to create really long-term foundational companies. But to do that, and Reshma is a perfect example, to do what she did, Gingko had to keep hitting massive milestones with and they're going to continue to do that in the public markets. But they had to stay on their North Star, which is like make biology easier to engineer, right? That was there from the beginning. That's what we do. But don't think of it. And by the way, because we think of it that way, and because we're going after massive markets, many of these companies will be able to get out to the public markets much earlier than probably most people expect, right? Maybe it's year 5, maybe it's year 7, maybe it's year 10, maybe it's year 12, who knows? Or maybe it's year 18. But it's happening at faster and faster paces.
We're going to have another session on that, about the timing of getting the public markets. And if you agree that some are getting there at the right time, also private equity versus venture versus offices versus everything, because there's just so much out there right now. But we have to stay focused on our conversation. Reshma, I want to ask the same question to you. There are a lot of very bright PhD students out there, but they see that barrier of crossing the chasm of taking their ideas and their research into building a company. They find it almost, too big of a challenge. What advice do you give those bright people?
I think the key is always be learning, right? Something I like to tell folks is that I am super qualified for my job 2 years ago, right? Like by definition, if you are an entrepreneur or founder of a fast scaling company, you are in over your head at any given time. So you kind of just have to mentally accept that and realize that the only way you're going to keep up is by continuing to grow yourself. And that means you're always learning. You're always seeking advice from people above you, below you, peers, and you're, analyzing that advice and you're taking it in and you're constantly trying to improve yourself. And so that learning mindset, I think, is really key to any founder who wants to be part of a fast growing company or candidly any team member on a fast growing company.
I have to ask you sort of a fun, nosy question. I asked this to Steve Fredette, who founded Toast. I said, what did you do the night of your IPO when all of a sudden you're worth this much more? Did you do anything?
We just had a dinner and then went to a bar and had drinks with our team. So we brought the whole team to New York, and it was a lot of fun to just celebrate all together with all these people who had worked for so many years together.
The best entrepreneurs really don't do anything. I think Mike Massaro from Flywire said, I took out the trash the next day. Just worth a little bit more money, but I still took out the trash. Yeah. Okay, we have reached 4:50 p.m. and that was my directed hard cutoff. The time went by so fast. I think maybe we should have a second session about all the things that we were not able to get to today. But for now, Reshma, Katie, thank you so much. This was a fascinating conversation for me. I learned so much, and it's really been a privilege to spend this afternoon with you. And let's bring back Sarah Fay from Glasswing now, who will take us into the rest of the program.
Thanks, Janet.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank
Reshma.
you so much, Katie and Reshma. Please, everyone out there, show our speakers some chat love, because I think everybody got a lot out of this conversation. And Janet, thanks for asking the hard questions about doing the hard thing. I think there were a lot of examples here about the complexity of building a business, the complexity of running a VC firm. So I'm going to plug one more time. My only regret here was that it wasn't in person. We had really wanted to have you all in a room with these women and with all of us, and to be able to gather afterward and to start talking about getting people more involved with the efforts of All Raise. And so that's still in the plan. So please put March 2nd on your calendar. We're all going to be brave, and we're going to do it. And maybe we'll reel in some of these women. Wouldn't that be great? Anyway, we'll be back in touch with you to see if you're available for that. Meanwhile, we are all going to go to breakout rooms just so we can have a little discussion amongst ourselves about what we've heard here and about some of your challenges. So if you could click on rooms, I believe that's what's going to happen, Jenny. You'll be put into a breakout room.
Hey everyone. Hi Sarah. Thanks Reshma, Janet, and Katie. Just wanted to give some details on the networking rooms. You will see where it says rooms above. Just click there once Sarah gives the official go, and we will get to network with each other and really talk about what's hard that we're working on now. It's like if you're at a regular event, you'll see different rooms and you could take a seat at a table, and hopefully you'll be able to meet some new people as well.
All right, click on the rooms and we'll see what happens.
We'll see you soon.